Welcome everyone to another episode of Finding Your Freedom podcast, where today I want to bust some myths and reassure any of you contemplating recovery or who are currently in recovery that allowing yourself food will not mean you will never be able to stop eating and you won't become addicted to food. And actually why I don't believe there is such a thing as food addiction. And of course I get it. When you've denied yourself something for such a long time, when you've only been able to dream about that tasty, fulfilling food, when you've been watching normal eaters from afar enjoying a pizza with just that pure joy on their face. And it's normal to consider that if you open up that door, that maybe you'll never close it again. And of course in recovery, we want you to open the door and keep the door open to all food forever. But I want to reassure you that when your body is fully recovered at whatever weight is right for you, well, your hunger will return to normal and your cravings will also normalise, because you'll be in a place where you can have what you want when you want. So the concept of not being able to stop eating will diminish. And of course, this thought of not being able to stop eating or endlessly gaining weight or becoming addicted to food, it is a really big fear for many people in recovery. But if you believe it, it will keep you stuck because you'll be afraid of what comes after recovery. And I want to clarify here, freedom around food is not being out of control around food. It's having such a free relationship with food that no control is needed. So I just want to kind of give that a bit of context, because initially, as someone with an eating disorder, to me freedom around food was scary, because if I was completely free around it and nothing was off limits, what if I just wanted to eat anything and everything forever? But actually freedom around food is you just have such a free relationship that it's not about whether you lose control or not. There's no control needed. You just go back to eating how we're intended to eat. Okay, let's do an example. So say you've had a stressful week and you haven't been sleeping well. Are you then afraid that when you fall asleep that you'll never wake up, that you'll sleep forever, that you will need to sleep and sleep and sleep, and that sleep will become so out of control that you never wake up? Well, I assume that the answer to that is no. You'll look forward to getting the sleep you need without feeling any need to control it. And when you've had enough sleep and you've caught up, your normal sleep patterns will resume. And it's the same around food. It's the same in recovery. You will get all of the food you need when your body tells you you need it. You will eat and eat and eat because you've got years of restriction to make up for. But when you've had enough and your body has caught up, your normal eating patterns will resume. So let's think about maybe why you might be having these fears, because again, that makes sense. I know why this panic happens at the beginning of recovery, and it's not stupid by any means to think that you will want to eat endlessly forever and won't be able to stop. The reason you're probably feeling these things is because your body, once you start eating, will be sending you really strong messages that will support that belief that you will never stop eating. It will be so glad that the famine is finally over that your body actually and your brain will be screaming at you to give it everything all of the time. And there's a book I would suggest everyone reads who's contemplating or in recovery, and those are books of Tabitha Farrar, and there are a couple of quotes where she explains quite succinctly what is going on in her books. And this one is something that I found really helpful. You're not addicted to food, you are starving. And the other one, extreme hunger is not a problem to be solved, it's the solution. So if you can accept both of those things and know that this is just a process and a really healthy part of recovery, then the next question you might ask me is, well, how long will I feel this way around food? How long will I feel so hungry that it feels like an addiction that I can't stop eating? I'm addicted to food. I don't see this ever ending. How long is this going to last? And well, the answer to that is, if you tell me I've been eating all of the food, I've been eating so much food for a whole month now and I still need to eat so much food, Well, my answer to that question is, how long have you been restricting? Because if you've been restricting for years, you're not going to pay back the debt to your body in a month. It's going to take your body as long as it needs your body to become fit and healthy. So try not to stress about how long this is going to take. It will take as long as it takes for your body to start to normalise your hunger patterns. It will do that when it is fit and when it is well and when it feels safe that you are going to eat food. You can't just eat normally or eat loads of food in a month after years of restriction and expect your body to have everything it needs. But it will end. It will end when it's right for you. I want to move on now to this concept of whether it's actually even possible to become addicted to food. And we hear a lot about food addiction, sometimes in eating disorder recovery or just in society in general. And I know there are people who honestly believe that they are addicted to food and there is nothing they can do about it. And I'm not here to dismiss those feelings at all. This is not about judgment. But my belief is there is a simple answer to food addiction, and I will get to that shortly. But let's start with, well, where does this food addiction message come from? Well, let's start with the fact that as a society, we no longer seem to understand what food is actually intended to do, to nourish us and give us energy to get on with our lives. We now have a world that demonises the very thing we need to survive. Because we live in a world that moralises food, labels food as good and bad, praises control and restraint and restriction of food. It demonises hunger, and it treats eating for any kind of pleasure as suspicious or wrong or greedy. And so anyone who eats a lot of food, a perfectly normal biological response to restriction, well, you're then made to feel shame and guilt like you can't be trusted around food. And when that message that food can be addictive is around, it kind of then gives food this strange power, like it's bad for you and it's going to make your life some kind of living misery if you don't stop eating it, and it will take a hold of you and you will be powerless. And so that, to everybody, probably sounds and feels like addiction. You're constantly thinking about food, you're planning it, you're craving it, you're fantasizing about it, you're feeling out of control around it. And so maybe the word addiction feels like the only explanation that makes sense. And in a world where we're all supposed to constantly deprive ourselves of food in the attempt to have a perfect body, well, of course that conclusion feels logical. But there's a really missing important piece of context. And this is why I don't believe people are addicted to food. Because the reality is, restriction of food creates obsession around food. And it's not just physical restriction, but it's mental restriction too. Because when we restrict anything we care about, food, rest, pleasure, that doesn't make the desire disappear, it amplifies it. Restriction is signalling that there's a lack of something in your brain, a lack of food, a lack of rest, a lack of pleasure. And so that scarcity naturally sharpens your brain's focus, making the restricted thing feel even more urgent, more valuable, and harder to stop thinking about. So what begins as trying to control our desire for something just turns into a preoccupation with it. And the more rigid the rules we impose on ourselves, then the louder the obsession becomes, because our mind is wired to protect access to what we believe is being threatened. So the more you restrict food, that tells your body that food is scarce, and the brain does exactly what it's designed to do, and it prioritises thoughts of food above everything else. But that isn't addiction, that's a basic survival instinct. So when you stop restricting food, when you allow yourself to eat freely, well, those thoughts go away. You don't any longer feel that addiction because your brain no longer prioritises food over everything else because it's freely available, and it no longer sends those endless thoughts about food and what you can and can't eat. And what does science tell us about food addiction? because it's something that's being sold. I see it all the time. People being sold ways to stop being addicted to food, whether it's hypnosis, whether it's meditation, whatever it is. Somebody is going to sell you a way out of food addiction. But actually, there is no official diagnosis of food addiction, either in the United States or in the UK. And I've read about the studies, I've researched them, and sometimes you will be told about rodent studies that they try to justify to make food addiction a real thing. But actually, when you look closely at what those studies show, they actually show the opposite. And what actually happens is that these rodents, when they are given restricted access to food, or intermittent access to food, or unpredictable access to food, then they start to show these really strange, addictive looking behaviours. They start to eat really quickly, with urgency. They eat and eat and eat whatever's available and put in front of them, and they don't stop. But when those same animals are given free access to food and constant availability to food, those behaviours disappear. So it's the scarcity of the food that creates the addictive-like behaviours, and the availability of food that reduces them. So if food were addictive, the addiction behaviours would escalate with availability. The more you have, the more addicted you become and the more you need. Well, that isn't true, is it? When food's readily available and we can have it whenever we want, whatever we want, then those addictive type feelings that we have, well, they de-escalate, because we don't need to have it in case it goes away. It's always there. And another term I hear a lot around food is food noise. And just like addiction, I think food noise is simply a symptom of restriction. So if we go back again to constantly thinking about food, waiting for meals, fantasizing about what you wish you could have, and when you do eat, you start to feel out of control because you've denied food for so long. Well, that's one of the main reasons why diets fail. You restrict until it's unbearable, and then you take an opportunity to finally give in to your cravings, but because you know you're going to have to go back to restriction, then you eat everything in sight and start again on a Monday. So no wonder you have food noise, no wonder you're constantly thinking about food, because in your brain, you're constantly, whenever you allow yourself food, going to go back to restriction. And that means you're going to constantly think about food until you allow yourself to have food, and then you're going to feel guilt and shame about having food, and you're going to restrict food, and you're constantly going to have the food noise. If you take away the restriction, you know, just like in recovery from an eating disorder, you no longer think about food all the time, because your body trusts that food is freely available, and it stops sending those thoughts that you need to prioritise food. So I guess the message is that restriction mimics addiction, but it isn't addiction. The feelings and behaviours that look like addiction, that preoccupation, the urgency, the loss of perceived control, the guilt, the shame, the cycles of restriction and then overconsumption, well, they are real feelings. But eating more food in recovery is not addiction, because it doesn't work the same way. In addiction, a substance takes over the brain and then needs more and more to get the same effect, causes withdrawal when it's stopped, and then usually requires abstinence. In recovery, eating more is the body responding to restriction and repairing a shortage. It's not chasing a high. There's no tolerance effect. There's no withdrawal symptoms aside from hunger. So they don't even biologically work the same way. Hunger and strong urges for food are just signs of healing, and they reduce as the body is constantly fed. So why do people talk about being addicted to food? Maybe this isn't so relevant in recovery, but in society in general. I wonder if convincing ourselves that food is addictive maybe makes us feel better. Maybe it is telling us that there's just nothing we can do about it. I'm addicted to food, and Well, it maybe gives you a sense of an explanation. It maybe gives you a sense of control. It maybe gives you a reason to keep restricting. If you believe you have an addiction, then your solution will be to add more rules. But where have those rules got you? If you've got an eating disorder, it's becoming more and more ingrained. If you don't, but you're constantly dieting, then you are just going to continue on that miserable cycle forever. So I think people maybe have to change that mindset that they have an addiction and look at what the problem is. Instead of trying to impose more rules on yourself around an addiction that you feel ashamed of, being food, and this constant cycle of restricting and eating a lot and restricting and eating a lot and thinking about food constantly, instead of trying to find more rules to manage that, if you take away the restriction, then everything else works itself out. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I really believe I'm addicted to food, I really do think about food constantly, I want you to hear this. It doesn't mean you're addicted. It just means if you're in recovery and you feel like you're addicted to food, it just means your body hasn't yet felt safe. It isn't convinced the famine is over. So all you can do in that situation is convince your body that the famine is over, let your body feel safe, and you will stop thinking about food constantly. Once food is consistently available, physically and mentally, those thoughts are going to quiet down. And they're not going to quiet down because you've controlled them away. They're going to quiet down because your body no longer has to scream at you to eat. And I want to end on this for anyone who isn't sure about starting recovery, or maybe they're in early stages of recovery and they still have all those fears around food addiction, about eating endlessly, about constantly gaining weight. Give recovery 6 months. Give it longer if you can, but why don't you set yourself a target to give recovery 6 months? In the same way that you decide and build up the motivation to go on a diet plan, instead, build up the motivation and commitment to yourself to 6 months of recovery. So 6 months of eating without restriction, resting as much as you can, letting go of any obsessive kind of exercise and movement. Just let your body lead and do what your body is asking you to do. Let your weight get to where it needs to get to. And if after 6 months you truly hate it and have not had one single benefit from recovery, well, you can always go back. If you honestly, after 6 months, believe that life with an eating disorder is better than life in recovery, there is nothing to stop you going back. You have the choice to do whatever you want. But from my experience, after 6 months, because while you may not be fully recovered, the reason I say 6 months is that things really started to change for me after about 6 months. From my experience, you won't go back, because the first 6 months are the hardest, and you'll have done all the hard work, and you'll have gone through all the messy bits and the hard bits, and you will actually be realising that nothing really bad happens by having a bigger body. You will be enjoying food, you will have headspace without constant thoughts about food, you will finally be seeing the benefits of recovery. So why would you want to go back? And you will also understand that food freedom is so much better than an eating disorder. Because food freedom isn't threatening your life every day. It's the thing that gives you your life back. So give it a go. You're not going to be addicted to food. You're not going to eat forever. You're not going to gain weight forever. You take the restriction away, you let your body need to do what it does, and you will get some sense of peace and freedom around food. And you will realise your body knows what it's doing, it will work itself out. Give it that, at least that initial 6 months, and trust me that you will see that it's not as scary as you thought. Get the hard work done, and from 6 months on you will be seeing so many benefits of recovery, and you'll be so motivated to carry on. Thank you everyone for listening today. I hope this episode has helped you. And of course, if you need support, reach out. You can find me on my website, which is findingyourfreedom.co.uk. Thank you for listening.